they stay there, and they stay there, and they stay there. Cause all I do is win. We the best.
Hello, everybody. It is great to be coming to you today virtually, although I know that we're all a little sad that we couldn't join together. So we should really just take a moment and think about the people of Louisiana and everyone that was in the path of Hurricane Ida. And, thank goodness that we are all safe. Now, as you know, I am here to talk to you today about diversity, inclusion, and unconscious bias, right? And how that becomes an issue in us attracting diverse markets. So I recognize that these are all topics that really make people uncomfortable. And in light of that, I am going to share a quick story with you that will lay the foundation for the time that we are going to spend together. There was an old woman getting married for the 4th time. Now, for whatever reason, the local news station thought this was news, and they sent a reporter to her home to speak with her. The reporter gets there and says, "Tell me a little bit about your past husbands." So the woman says, "In my 20s, I married a banker. In my 40s, I married a circus ringmaster. I'm sorry, in my 40s, yes, I married a circus ringmaster. In my 60s, I married a pastor. And now in my 80s, I'm about to marry a funeral director." The reporter says, "Wow, why so many husbands with such diverse careers?" She thought about it for a second and said, "Well, I married 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready, and 4 to go." Now, the foundation is not corny jokes, but I hope you like them as much as I do. The foundation is that this is not going to suck, okay? We are going to have a great time, again, discussing what for many folks is a very difficult topic. So I just want to further allay all worries and fears. I am not going to bore you with complex methodology, terminology, or academia. Totally not my style. I am not here to blame you, guilt you, or judge you. I believe there's a higher power in charge of that. That is not me. I am not here to tell you how to think, how to act, or feel. Listen, I'm not even going to try to change your mind. I could die before some of you change your mind. All I want to do is provide you with a few different perspectives, and you get to form your own views. Fair enough, right? Super easy. But I am going to ask a few things of you before we get started. First and foremost, I am going to ask you to be honest. Not with me, not with your associates, but totally with yourself. Be honest about your feelings and your thoughts as I go through this presentation, because that is really the starting point of dealing with this. The next thing I'm going to ask of you is to be open. A closed mind is the antithesis to embracing diversity, inclusion, or really just anything in life. And the last thing I'm going to ask of you is that you're engaged. Again, I know we were all super hyped about getting to see each other in person because we are seemingly in front of some virtual platform every day of our lives for the past 18 months, right? But engagement is so important, especially in a difficult topic. So I'm going to help you do that by asking you to go to minty.com. You're going to put in the code 3023-3582. Again, that is 3023-3582. No login necessary. It takes a couple of seconds to do. Just open a new browser, and I'm going to ask you questions throughout the presentation, and this is where you get to be honest. The great thing about this program, complete anonymity. So you can feel empowered to be honest because no one knows who said what. So I hope that you are all with me and that you are ready to do this. Now, you've heard my bio, and I've been blessed to accomplish a lot of things in my life, but that tells you nothing about who I am as a person. So please allow me to formally introduce myself. I'm a small town, divorced ex-preacher's wife who comes from a loving but largely religious family. Now, some describe me as a competitive, relentless ex-Division I basketball player, but my friends, as an extremely loyal but conditional extrovert, I also happen to be a bisexual Black woman, a serial entrepreneur, and a Catholic middle school basketball coach who runs a diversity consulting and communications firm in one of the reddest states in the nation. I am diversity personified, but so are all of you. All of us are diverse in some ways. And that is your first question. Tell me what your diversity is. You just heard all of mine. Share with me what your diversity is. And the reason this is important is because as we talk about how to attract diverse markets, we're going to talk about the major issue that stops us from doing that. And that is unconscious bias. So as you look at the diversity and you see who's around you, maybe you realize that you're uncomfortable around those kind of people, right? And they're your associates. This will help you break down barriers. And maybe people you're uncomfortable around, or maybe the people that you are uncomfortable around, you have close proximity to, and you can use that to break down that barrier. So I have white, gay, I'm an ally. What else? A horse owner, a mother, a small town girl, me too. Urban, equanimity, fair, merit, vision and hearing impaired, a young leader. I love it. Older, male, intelligent. What else do we have here? Computer geek, Black, intelligent, stupid. Somebody says they are stupid. You don't see that too often. Musician, right? Silly. So even as you look through this and you realize there are so many people that are diverse. See, what happens is for a lot of us, when we walk out of our homes, for whatever reason, we close the door behind us and we close the door on our diversity, right? And we all have it. It makes no sense, but we know that for some of us that where diversity is not visible, if we don't do that, we are going to be treated differently because frankly, people find diversity extremely challenging. And challenging is put it into nice terms. If I were to put it into real terms, I would say that Black and brown folks are being killed at the hands of those that are supposed to protect. We've heard the words Black man weaponized, and we know that racial disparities exist in every area of the United States. We know that we have work to do, right? Because we keep looking at diversity as abnormal. But this is the thing, diversity just is. It is our race, our ethnicity, our gender, our age, our religion, our political affiliation, our socioeconomic status. But it's also our food preferences, our clothing choices, how we rock our hairstyle. It is who we are, point blank, period. I was listening to Shonda Rhimes. I know that you all know who Shonda Rhimes is, super producer that creates everything you watch on Thursday night. We have How to Get Away with Murder, Grey's Anatomy. It used to be Scandal. And I know all of you are tuning into Bridgerton. But anyway, she said something that I thought was so simple but profound. She said, people continuously ask me why I cast lead characters of color, those with different physical ability, gay characters. She said, because it's normal. See, the only thing abnormal about diversity is that we continue to work in places and live in communities where everyone looks the same, everyone thinks the same. We know in the United States that we are predicted to be minority majority by 2039. Now, see, I have a nephew that's 13 years old. When he started school, his class was projected to be the class that will make the United States minority majority. We have 5 states that are already there, right? This is not a myth. This is happening in real time. So we've got to change how it is that we think about it. And the cool thing about diversity is that it is all about you. It's where you get to do you. Now, inclusion, this is where we suck. We're supposed to make sure that everybody's invited, involved, and engaged, but we do a horrible job of that. Think about how many people you sit in meetings with week after week who don't say anything. Now, while you're thinking about that, I'm going to jump over to basketball. You heard me say earlier that I play basketball, but the truth of the matter is when I began playing basketball, I hated it with a passion, right? Because that older family, that a big, large family that I also mentioned, there's a hierarchy. So those of you from a large family, you know there's a hierarchy, right? For me, that hierarchy was my older cousins. Every cousin older than me was in charge of me. So that meant they had to know where I was all day. I couldn't get lost, right? And I couldn't be hurt or crying. So in order for them to do that, they made me play basketball, but they never allowed me to touch the ball. Now you may be thinking, what does that look like? Well, it looks like this kid running up and down the court. And every time the ball accidentally came my way, everybody yelled, hurry up, give it back. you know you're not supposed to touch it. You can see why I hated the game. But I lived next door to the recreation center where we played every day. So I decided I can be the first kid in the gym, teach myself how to play basketball, and, just prove to my older cousins that if I want to play, I can. So that's what I started doing, being the first kid in the gym every morning. A few weeks in, another cousin shows up. He's older than all of us and one of the best players in the state. Now, I got to tell you, I'm from a small town, so everybody was my cousin. But I'm on one end of the court, he's on the other end of the court. And I imagine one day I must have looked horrible because he yells down, "Hey, you don't shoot the ball like that. You shoot it like this. You don't pass the ball like that. You should pass it like this." He comes to my end of the court, starts working with me every day. And before I know it, I am in love with this sport that I hated. Now, those of you who play ball, especially back in the day, you will remember that the older kids would show up and just kick the young kids off the court every evening. Well, much to the chagrin of these older players, my cousin started picking me to be on his team. Okay, I use the word chagrin. Let me just keep it real. Those older guys were pissed, y'all. Nobody wanted to play ball with this skinny little girl who knew nothing about the game. So their answer to that was just to walk up, snatch the ball from me, get on with their game, right? My cousin would not allow it. He became my ally. See, he started blocking them and guarding them. And he'd say, "Risha, take the shot I taught you. Do the move I showed you." Y'all, that's inclusion. If you want to make a difference in someone's life, you do that through inclusion. And inclusion becomes the conduit to how it is that we can attract all kinds of people to our businesses by making them feel as if they belong. Right? Because now, if you'll think about those people I was talking about earlier that you're sitting in meetings with week after week who aren't saying anything, it's not that they don't have anything to say. It's that seemingly there may be something about your culture that is making them feel as if their voice doesn't matter. This is where you get to think about, how can I be an ally? How can I step up and let them know that they are a part of the team? See, thanks to my older cousins, they no longer just allowed me on the court, but they taught me to play the game. And I was able to parlay that into several Division I scholarship offers. That's what we've got to do for each other. See, inclusion is about us standing up, linking arms, and together speaking up and speaking out for each other. I mean, think about how much strength you have when you know that someone's got your back. And that is how we're going to build the teams that we need to build in order to be ready for this new America that's constantly shaping, right? So remember, diversity all about you. Inclusion, that's about us. Then we have diverse markets here. So diverse markets are just diverse individuals grouped together by race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, etc., for marketing purposes. That's it. To go out there and make sure that you are attracting all of the markets, all of the people that are eligible, that are able to purchase your product or service, whatever that is. So I want you to really think about those definitions and think about diversity, because to me, it is one of the coolest things that we get to have. Inherently, we all have it, right? But if it is that cool, why do you think it causes division? Because that's a reality. Why does diversity cause division? And you will see, I had the opportunity to speak to over 50,000 people last year alone. And I was able to ask this question and to see how many people feel the same way about this subject matter means that we have work to do. So I know there's a little bit of a delay here, but tell me why it is that you think diversity causes division. I want to see if you're in line with all of the other people that I've been talking to. That's it. Fear. Fear has been the number one answer for almost 100,000 people. We're scared, right? We're closed-minded, self-preservation of the majority. We gravitate to those with the same opinions, self-centeredness. They're not like me. People fear the unknown, the other. All of this. This is the thing, though, that I know about people when it comes to fear. For a lot of us, we like to face our fears head on, no matter how scared we are. But when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, I have seen people be more laid back and complacent than with anything else. And we see where that has gotten us. We can face this fear head on. All we have to do is put the humanity back into it, right? Because that is one sure thing that we all have in common, no matter who we are or what group that we belong to. I also see ignorance here. People are threatened by diversity, misunderstanding, value of differences. All of these things are so true. But we know that we can fix these things. In fact, we have to fix these things because we continue to see diversity as a problem, but we don't have diversity problems. We have people problems. I'm the problem. You're the problem. All of us are the problem. And it's going to take every last one of us to fix it. But I've got great news. Experts tell us that the first step in fixing any problem is admitting that we have one. And that is what we have been seeing for the past year. I'm so empowered by that because I've been doing this work for 25 years. And I can tell you, I just felt like, you know what? I am planting seeds for a tree whose shade I will never sit under, right? But I don't feel like that anymore because in the past year, after the murder of George Floyd, I saw people come together in ways that I've never seen. And I'm talking all kinds of people, right? White, black, brown, whoever. We stood together, we linked arms. And I read a stat that said 52% of the protesters were white folks. It's so empowering right now because organizations like yours, companies, people are saying, we have a problem. We're going to stand together and fix this problem. We're going to admit what it is. So I have felt empowered for the first time in my career because I really see the needle moving. I see people wanting to make change. So that is super important. And I hope that we continue along that vein because I can tell you right now, the most pervasive issue that we have is unconscious bias. Unconscious bias is an unrecognizable part of our upbringing. See, we are living through the past hurts, pains, and experiences of the people who raised us. They went through some things. They don't want to see us go through those same things, so they teach us about other people. And it introduces that us versus them mentality. Now, for a lot of us, it wasn't done with hatred in mind. It was done as a way to protect us. But this is the thing. When we carry around unconscious biases, we project those things onto those people, and it stops us not just in our personal lives, but in our businesses. Because now we're not going after those markets that we need to go after because of all the things that we think in our heads about that, right? About those groups of people. So we've got to change that. We've got to change it personally, morally, but we also have to change it for our businesses. So I am going to introduce you to my grandmother. Now, let me preface this by saying that my grandma and Jesus were best friends, y'all. And I mean that. I mean that my grandmother was a gangster for God. And she was the most loving person that you would ever meet. My grandmother didn't care about someone's race. She didn't care about their age and all of those things, right? She just truly loved people. And that was because of her belief in her religion. But I got to tell you, her religion ran her life, my life, and anybody's life whose life hers intersected, right? But my grandmother was a maid for a white family in the small town that we grew up in. There were times that I would go to work with her, but I went every single time her boss's grandkids were in town so that we could play together. And as you can see, this started really, really early for us. But one particular day, we're in the floor playing when her boss says, "Hey, what do you guys want to be when you grow up?" Have no idea, right? Never thought about it in my life. Now, the other kids are obviously giving great answers because the adults are clapping, they're cheering, and I'm just over there sweating bullets. Because again, I've never thought about what I wanted to be when I grow up. But in the moment, I think about my grandmother. I think about how awesome she is, how awesome everybody else thinks she is. So when it's my turn, I yell out, "I want to be a maid like grandma." The adults start clapping, they start cheering, and I'm thinking, yes, I nailed this. Until my grandmother comes out of the back. She gets on her knees and grabs me by both arms. She looks at me and says, "Do you think I'm doing this because I want to? I'm thinking, yeah, because, that's adults do what they want to do, right? She said, no, I'm doing this because I have to. You are going to college. I had no idea what college was, but I can tell you by the look in her eyes, I knew I would be there. When I think back about the moment, I realized it got very quiet, even awkward. The adults stopped clapping, they stopped cheering. We get in the car to go home, and she says, I wanted to be a nurse, but they wouldn't allow it. Now, I didn't ask who they were, and she didn't tell me, but us versus them had inadvertently been introduced to me that day. And I can tell y'all, for several years after that, whenever someone said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I just said a college. I did not want any problems with my grandmother, but it didn't stop there. Now I'm going to take you back, way back. Remember when kids actually played outside? I'm from that era. We played outside every day, killer kickball games going on. But my grandmother decides one summer, I don't get to play outside. I'm going to be inside learning how to read, how to write, how to count, all of the things that I'm supposed to learn in school. So, of course, I say, Grandma, I thought I was going to learn these things at school. She said, well, they may not teach you the way they teach the other kids. Now, I know some of you are old enough to remember when penny candy actually cost a penny. I will go to the store, grab 2 or 3 pieces of candy, jump back in the car. The first thing my grandmother would say to me is, where's your sack and your receipt? I'm like, Grandma, it's 2 pieces of candy. She would say, I don't care, go back. They're going to think you stole that. Now, as you can imagine, they are really starting to get on my nerves. But the day I found out who they were was in a Walmart parking lot where I was having a complete and total meltdown, and my grandmother was thoroughly frustrated because she was trying to tuck my shirt into my shorts, but it was not that kind of outfit. She finally looks at me and says, they gonna think you haven't been raised right. I said, who, Grandma? She looked at me and said, white folks, child. You can only imagine the level of insanity I was thinking at the time, or how insane that sounded to me. I remember thinking, that's who you've been talking about this entire time, white people? They are everywhere. I went, looked up the demographics of the town that I'm from. No kidding, the town was over 90% white. In my young mind, I'm thinking, there's no way I'm gonna make it because they don't like me. They don't like us. They wouldn't allow Grandma to be a nurse. I couldn't play outside. They're gonna think I stole my candy, and now I've got to tuck my shirt in when it's not supposed to be. I got a problem with these people since they have a problem with me. But here's the real issue. I had never had a negative interaction with a white person in my life at this time. My grandmother had what you call validated bias. She was a Black woman born in 1923, Oklahoma. We can only imagine the level of prejudice, of racism, right, that she experienced. And for her, if she could help someone, especially her kids and her grandkids, navigate in a world that wasn't built for them, she was going to do that, regardless of her belief system. But this is the thing, it doesn't matter. It truly doesn't matter how great the story is, what our experiences are. We have to get rid of the BS. We have to be able to move past that so that we can treat people with the common courtesy and decency that we all deserve, right? So tell me what your biases are. Well, first, tell me what your BS means. I'm sorry. What does BS mean? Now, you've heard us talk about BS a couple of times here, and I know we have a universal meaning for it, but tell me, what does BS mean? It's absolutely important that we get rid of it. Big right there, bullshit. That is definitely what people mean when they hear BS. We have any other means out there? Excuses, lies, fluff, something unfair, elitism. What else? I don't know. Okay. Untruths, being stubborn. People get pretty creative with it. Yeah, that. Okay. Hate. It means all of those things, but yeah, BS typically stands for bullshit. And whoever put it up there, I really appreciate you being courageous enough to do it. But here's the thing, it actually stands for bias synapse. But it is a play on bullshit because I believe that when we treat people badly, based upon some diverse characteristic, that's the BS part of this. That's the part that we have to change. Now, I promise you that I would not hit you hard with academics, but I am going to take you back to eighth grade science for just a moment. If you remember that a synapse, if you'll remember, a synapse is how our brain communicates between brain cells. That usually happens in one direction, that direction being negative. Same way that we think about our biases. They happen in one direction as well, that direction being negative. So when I was working on my book, I became a fan of Joseph Ledoux. He is a New York University brain researcher and neurologist. He wrote a book called The Synaptic Self and believes that we live our lives in the synapse of our brains, meaning that's where all memories are created, good, bad, indifferent. So I want you to imagine that you are on an elevator and this person gets on the elevator with you. Now, something about this person just really makes you uncomfortable because it's over 100 degrees outside. Person has on a heavy trench coat, hair disheveled. So the hair on the back of your neck is standing up. You think to yourself, I'm uncomfortable, I'm getting off the elevator. You get off the elevator, the person follows you. You start walking fast, they walk fast. You take off running, this person attacks you. Now, alternatively, could be a few years down the road, you see another person, heavy trench coat, hair disheveled, but this time it's 20 degrees outside and there's a blizzard, so it makes sense. Our brains work on autopilot. So what's going to happen is that your brain is going to remember that last negative interaction, and you're going to take off running from someone who's not even chasing you. Let me make this a little more simple. How many of you have driven home or driven to work and don't remember how you got there? You just look up, there's your house or your office building. You don't remember if you ran a stop sign, hit a person on the way or anything. That is your brain on autopilot. The great thing about it is that we can turn it off. In fact, we have to, because say a person of a different race offends you. Instead of you dealing with that person as the one who offended you, now you will deal with every person that looks like that person as the one who offended you. And that is the BS part of this. That's the part that we can, without a doubt, do away with, because we need to treat people for who they are, not for the group that they belong to. So I've come up with a simple 3-step process that's going to help us with this. And now I tend to think everything about diversity and inclusion is pretty simple. I think we have made it difficult and it's become so convoluted that we can no longer have conversations with each other or communicate with each other. The only thing difficult about my process is that you're going to realize some things about yourself that are not that great. And we all like to think we're great people. Most of us are. But that doesn't mean that there aren't some things that we can do to become even better. So all you're going to do is grant yourself permission to feel however it is you feel about issues surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion. You just have to be committed to moving through those things. So the first step here is to identify the BS. You absolutely have to identify it. If you don't identify it, there's no way that you are going to move through it. So tell me now, what is your BS? What are your biases? And this is where I want you to dig deep and get really honest. Think about when you're on an elevator again, and certain people get on there, think about who makes you shrink in the corner of the elevator or hold your purse a little more closely to your body. Think about who makes you uncomfortable. So tell me, what is your BS? I'm going to share my BS here with you in just a moment, but so I'm not out here by myself, please share with me your BS. Where you'll see, we have so much so many people out there that we just truly, truly fear or feel uncomfortable around. So poorly dressed people, different smells. We're gonna talk about that in just a minute. Being in an unfamiliar area, parents is your bias. Most Black people don't like white people. Driving in sketchy areas and locking my doors, people who don't make eye contact, shifty eyes, people who look mean, homeless guy standing on the corner begging for money, people staring at me, not knowing why. Appearance, people with bad personal care, folks that stink. They did this to themselves. Yeah, that's a pretty big one. And that's a pretty honest assessment there. We do tend to think that people are in certain circumstances because of their bad decisions. Somebody put Karen. We see that one a lot. Inner city, folks that don't acknowledge you. Anyone too close freaks me out. Loving the 6 feet. I hear you. Size when they are large. Why was I really hired? Always the only at my jobs. Lazy. Those who talk with slang. This is what I have to tell you. And having asked this question and talked to 50,000 people, what I've learned is that we don't like anybody. It doesn't matter if a person is short, tall, big, small, white, Black, Hispanic. We have a problem with everybody. I don't know if we're looking for the person just like us or the perfect person. Either way, it doesn't exist. What we have to know here is that there are outliers. There are outliers. You can't just look at every white woman and assume she's a Karen, right? We can't look at all homeless people and just assume that they put themselves in that situation. So there are outliers in every area of the people that you have put up there. We have to be able to think outside of this. And again, approach people for who they are. Because if we can get away from thinking about this, we can actually go after those diverse markets, right? All Black people do not think all white people are bad. That's just not true. So what we have to do again is assess those experiences. Now, I'm going to share my BS with you. Quick caveat, you don't have to like my BS, you don't have to agree with my BS, and you certainly don't have to email me later to let me know that you don't agree with my BS, but here we go. I didn't trust white folks, and I still struggle with it sometimes because of the stories that I shared with you earlier, as well as some personal experiences that I've had throughout life. Next, I didn't understand girls who wanted to be boys or boys who wanted to be girls. And yes, I am talking about transgender people. But let me say this, if you're transgender or you know or love someone who is, please don't click off. I realize how ignorant that statement is, but I didn't when I started my journey, right? That's where I began. And frankly, a lot of you are probably still there, but I did the work. I self-educated. I got to know some trans people. And personally, I think they are some of the most courageous people that I've ever had the opportunity to meet. Now, last but not least, this one would have my grandmother rolling over in her grave, but heaven seems like an extremely difficult place to get into. And I don't think it's supposed to be, right? I think it's supposed to be about love, but religion is extremely divisive. As sweet as my grandmother was, there were times that I wanted to go to church with my best friend who was raised of a different faith. And I was allowed to go, but as soon as I got back, my grandmother wanted to know what they taught me in case she needed to unteach it, right? So I've just said to a very large group of people that I didn't trust white folks. I think that was very brave and courageous. But this is the thing. I had my ancestry DNA done. Yes, you know where I'm going with this, right? I'm 20% white. Now, some of you are probably just like, whatever. But 20% is a lot. It's an entire fifth of who I am as a person. It caused me to get on the phone and make a few phone calls to some of the older family members to find out how it was that I could possibly be 20% white. So here I am mistrusting white folks, and y'all are my peeps too. I say that jokingly, but I do believe if we would all get our ancestry tested, we would truly learn that humankind is interconnected and that our diversity is just the best way to expose that ideology. So that's my BS. Those are the things that have affected me a lot in my life that I've had to work to get through. And now I've developed a BS finder, to help us with all of this, because otherwise, how are we going to figure out our BS? So great thing is, if you already know, you're probably going to learn a lot more. If you don't know, this will be a great exercise for you to go through. The first step in this is to assess it. You want to think about who makes you uncomfortable and why. It's that simple. Who makes you uncomfortable and why? I want you to imagine that you're on an airplane. They've announced that the flight is completely full, but that seat next to you is open. Now, we've all done it. We see people coming down the aisle. We look at them and do that silent prayer. Please don't sit here. Please don't sit here. Because in 3 to 5 seconds, we've taken a person, judged them, and decided that they aren't worthy enough just to sit next to us on a flight, right? We do it all the time. Now I'm going to call out a few people, and you decide whether or not you want to sit next to them. What about the obese person? How many of you would want to sit next to a person that is obese? Now, I can imagine that a lot of you would tell me, I do not want to sit next to that person because I'm going to be uncomfortable for the entire flight. True, I'll give you that. Now for those of you that are more brave, I want to ask, are you also worried about odor? Some of you will raise your hands and say yes. And according to your biases, a few of you cannot stand people who stink, right? So we tend to associate bad odor with big people. But think about it. There are people from different countries who cook differently, use different seasonings. There's an odor there. I'm not saying it's a bad one, but I'm saying it may be one you don't want to smell for an entire flight. There are people from countries, and there are certain countries that don't appreciate deodorant the way that we do here in the US. That's a smell you may not want to smell for the entire flight. And I've been blessed to sit in first class with many well-dressed folks, some of whom just stink. So my point is, you cannot associate bad odor with one type of person. That is how stereotypes get started. Now, what about that person coming down the aisle with facial tattoos, piercings, and dyed hair? A lot of you would tell me, well, people are getting better with this question, actually. So maybe not a lot of you, but a few of you would say, I'm a little concerned about that because you tend to think that they may have a criminal background. Now, if a person has a teardrop under their eye, I may be inclined to agree with you. Otherwise, people with facial tats have some of the best stories, and they are some of the sweetest people. And I got to tell you, it's another bias of mine, because when I see you with an AK-47 tatted across your forehead, I'm thinking you're not in the corporate world. And I usually see a person with a facial tat and say, so what kind of business do you own? Right? This is the thing. If you have an aversion to people with facial tats or tattoos, period, piercings and dyed hair, they now represent over 60% of our job market, right? So your candidate pool is going to get smaller and smaller if you have a problem with that. What about the person coming down the aisle wearing a turban or a hijab? Some of you would tell me, well, it definitely makes me a little nervous on a flight because terrorism. But I want to challenge you a little bit. What has terrorism looked like in the US over the past few years? Even this year, for some of us, it's looked like our husbands, our sons, our cousins, nephews, someone that we love and care deeply about. And how furious would you be if people began to treat your loved one differently based on the fact that they resemble the last person who maybe shot up a store, a church, or a school? It's ridiculous, but we do these things to people every day. We just group people together no matter who they are. And that's what we have to stop doing. Now, this last person coming down the aisle has the kids strapped to the front. The kids' arms and legs are flailing and the kids are already screaming. I can imagine that all of you would tell me you don't want to sit next to that person. And I just want to tell you, you are so wrong for that. We are supposed to help parents. We're supposed to hold that kid, let the parents get settled, and be in harmony for the rest of the flight, right? I know that it doesn't work like that. I say it all jokingly, but think about who makes you uncomfortable and why. And you'll have to excuse me, my voice is very scratchy, so I'm trying to drink tea between each one of these. The next one is attribution. You want to think about if you're uncomfortable, if it's your fault, right? Or if it's your issue or their fault that you're uncomfortable. All you. A little hint, it's all you. Who cares what a person wears, how they look, any of those things. They're only sitting next to you for the duration of a flight. It's a great opportunity for you to break down barriers, to have a conversation, to laugh, to talk with someone different from you, because you're going to learn that we have the same worries, the same fears, right? Some of the same desires. It becomes less about what they look like on the outside and who they are on the inside. Last but not least is identification. And the only reason this is important is the more deeply rooted it is, the more difficult it is to get over. When I talked about my grandmother asking about a sack and a receipt, I was a really little kid. Here I am in my mid 40s. And if I go into the store to buy a 2 liter of soda, same thing happens. I go back mentally to that place because of how deeply rooted it is in me. So think about it, assess it, attribute it, and identify where it comes from. Now, there are 4 factors that reinforce bias. Personal experience, we've been talking about the entire time. Same thing with family. Just remember, with family, it's usually fear-based and generational. Our friends. At our ages, we don't like to admit that our friends still have as much influence in our lives as they do, but they do. Think about it. Our friends tell us which restaurants we should try, which doctors and dentists we should go to. When toilet paper is on sale, our friends play a big role in our lives. Some of us have friends that are out there spewing hate on social media platforms. This is where you can be a catalyst for change. Maybe you're the person that can get through to your friend because you have an authentic relationship. This would be a place where you can truly make a difference. Last but not least, we have media. Now, we've always needed media intelligence, but I think we can all agree that we need it now more than ever. When I was a kid, I used to watch Leave It to Beaver, I Love Lucy, The Jeffersons, and Good Times. 2 white shows and 2 black shows. In the white shows, you will remember that the parents had the little twin beds with the nightstand in the middle. In the black shows, the parents had one big bed like my parents. Well, I get invited to a friend's house, happens to be a white friend, happens to be the first time I've ever been to a white person's house. We are walking down the hall when I do a dead stop at her parents' bedroom. I said, "Hey, your parents have one big bed like my parents." She said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I thought white parents slept in little beds." It's been 30 years. And every time I run into this friend, she laughs at me about that because it was harmless and humorous. But think about what media has taught you about other cultures that's not so harmless or humorous, right? It used to be really monolithic, only one way to see different cultures, the marginalized cultures, right? We don't have that excuse anymore. From streaming services to podcasts to books to even regular TV now, we can learn about different cultures if we want to. And it's incumbent upon us to go out there and self-educate, because as you begin to build these authentic relationships, you can attract these diverse markets. So this is step 2. You got to own your BS. You want to own it. In this step, you want to say it out loud. When I say out loud, I don't trust any white people in the world. It sounds like the BS that it is. And this is the thing. When I started my speaking career, I met a white woman over the phone. We decided to work together. Barely knew each other, but we had to trust each other, and we have built a major business together. And it had to do with us dealing with each other as human beings one-on-one. Not me as a Black woman, not her as a white woman, but just as people. And we've built a highly successful business. So that would not have served me well. You've got to go out there and attract the people that are going to help you to meet those goals, whatever your goals are in life. So own your BS. Now, remember when I said everything about diversity and inclusion is simple? It is because we learned it when we were 5 years old. Whether it was your parents, your grandparents, your teachers, your Sunday school teachers, somebody said these things to you. You don't talk about people behind their backs or call them names. Right? I know you remember that one. Texaco, Coca-Cola spent over $368.5 million cumulatively because their employees were using the N-word. This was a long time ago, but people still remember it. Listening when others are speaking, Burger King. You remember when Burger King had the metal rails you had to walk through to get to the cash register? Wheelchairs didn't fit in the bathroom stalls. Burger King spent $19 million and remodeled every store. Working and playing well with others. We have so many companies that have pay inequities for women, for people of color. Same thing with lack of promotions. Walmart narrowly missed out on paying the largest gender discrimination lawsuit in US history. Nobody wants to work that hard to spend their profits defending their reputation and paying out lawsuits. Discrimination lawsuits are still the #1 lawsuit filed for business in the US. And this would all be so simple if we would just be kind to each other. And I know that sounds elementary, but think about it. Kindness goes a long way and would have stopped a lot of these things that these companies have paid millions in fighting discrimination lawsuits. And for so long, we have made all of the talk around diversity for our companies about the economics. And I get it. We're businesses. We need to make money. It needs to affect our bottom line. But there's a moral side to this, because we're not just losing money anymore. We are also losing lives. We watched as Ahmaud Arbery was killed for supposedly jogging in the wrong neighborhood. We have Breonna Taylor, a medical professional, killed because proper police protocol was not followed. And then George Floyd, who has been the catalyst with so many others for the change that we have seen happen over the past year. We have to remember that the price of inclusion is so much cheaper than the price of exclusion. The price of inclusion is so much cheaper than the price of exclusion. Tell me how it is that your bias shows up in your behavior. How does your bias show up in your behavior? Isolation from others, definitely. Attitude, avoidance, reactions. Yeah, avoidance is always that #1 answer. That's what I was doing in the trans community, is avoidance. This is the thing though, people feel that stuff. It doesn't matter if we think we're getting away with it. Usually we're not, right? People will know, people can look at you and tell by your face if they can even say hello to you or smile at you. I'm not reaching out, I'm silent. I stay quiet, my face, yes. Our faces are a huge giveaway. Our nonverbal communication speaks very loudly in these spaces. My actions, my defensiveness, lost opportunities for growth. That is a huge one. And that's what we're doing, is we're losing opportunities for growth, both personally and professionally. So think about how your bias shows up in your behavior, but remember, people feel it, you're not getting away with it. We don't want to continue to lose opportunity. Man, I have met some of the coolest people of all different diversity, and I'm so much more enriched and blessed to have that in my life. So let's get to the real why. We know that unconscious bias can be a major barrier to this, but let's look at the other part of this: diverse buying power. We're talking almost $15 trillion in disposable income. That is money after bills are paid for people to spend money on your products and services. You've got African Americans at 1.2 trillion, Hispanic, Latinx, 1.5 trillion, Asian American at $1 trillion, Native Americans at 115 billion, women over 5 trillion, LGBTQ plus over $1 trillion, and then we have disabilities at 490 billion. Almost $15 trillion for people to choose what they want to do with their money, where they want to buy insurance, what kind of insurances do they need, right? 38% of people of color are more likely to make purchases when ads reflect them. 38%. That's a huge number. Think about what that does for your bottom line. Think about what that 15 trillion does. A 0.5% of it will do for your bottom line. Now, I know that you represent all kinds of insurance, but I focused in here on uninsured Americans simply because we're in a pandemic. And so I thought it had a lot more relatability right now. So you have 9.6 Black Americans that are uninsured, 16.7 Hispanic, 6.2 Asian, 5.2 white. That's a lot of people that need insurance and for whatever reasons may not be able to get insurance or afford insurance, but also marketing toward them is super, super important, right? So whether it's car insurance or house insurance, we get to choose that and decide if that choice is going to be with you or your firm. Now, benefits of doing this: 2 times as likely to meet or exceed financial targets, 3 times as likely to be high performing, 6 times more likely to be innovative and agile, and 8 times as likely to achieve better business outcomes. The thing is, you've got to go out there and be unconventional. Think about how you can be unconventional. You know, I tell people all the time, on a Saturday morning, a Black hair salon, a Hispanic barbershop, a Black barbershop, those are places where people are gathering. You could do something unconventional, like partner with that barbershop, use that parking lot, put people in t-shirts, talk to people as they come in. That is something that I've done, and I know that it works. You can partner with Black churches, with Hispanic churches, right? Get to those congregations. Be unconventional in how you reach people. Now, step 3, confront the BS. This is the action step. This is where you're going to get to work so you can move past this. Now, how are you going to do it? Well, we're going to start with unconditional love. Now, I know you're thinking, oh, great, the touchy-feely stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. Although I don't see anything wrong with it, I know that some people do. I'm actually talking about the total acceptance of humanity kind of love, the kind that allows people, right, to be who they are simply because they're another human being taking up space. Figure out how to reach those people. You can do it through print, through online, right, through television. There are so many ways for you to segment your audience and actually go in for that audience. So confront people with total acceptance of humanity kind of love. Tell me that one thing you're going to do to embrace change. What's the one thing you will do to embrace change? Now, this is something I want you to hold yourself accountable to, not your associates, no coworkers, family. This is just about you making one commitment to do something better for the world. Yes, be more open-minded. What else do we have here? Open mind. Open mind. That's good though. We've got to be more open. We can't approach these things with a closed mind. Golden rule: treat people the way I want to be treated. I'm going to ask you to take that a little bit further and treat people the way they want to be treated also, because sometimes we don't all want to be treated the same. So I know that takes a little more work because you got to figure out what people want, but it goes a long way. Try to understand why others are different. Encourage the quiet team members. Smile at everyone. I can't tell you how important that is. Adults tell me all the time, people just don't smile at me, so I think they don't like me. Listen, be patient. Change takes time. It takes so much time. Seriously, talk to people, start conversations and listen. Be a visible ally. I love these, and I hope that you will hold yourself accountable to all of them. Champion D&I and my company do the work. And it is going to take some work because things are changing constantly. I do this for a living, and there is something new for me to learn. It seems like weekly. So yeah, it takes some time. And then not only do you see the change, but then you have to take some time to maybe figure it out for yourself and how you feel about it. So avoid, judge, and commit to continuous learning. I love all of these. It's time to make moves. We've sat around too long. It's time to get into it now. So be intentional. Be intentional. If I'm not intentional, I'm not inclusive. And again, this is all I do for a living, because we're also creatures of habit. I'm a Black woman who was born into a Black family. And even though I'm from a predominantly white town, I grew up on the Black side of town and I attended Black church. So guess what? When I'm getting ready to hire for my company or have a party at my house, it is Black people that have top of mind awareness. I have to think about who's going to enrich my company, who's going to make this event more fun. And that's going outside of what's in my head. We have to recruit diverse people. People want to see people who look like them. They may want to ask questions that they're just more comfortable asking people that look like them. Now, I know that maybe sounds like bias to you, and maybe it is, but the thing I'm trying to get across to you here is that you want to attract diverse markets. So that may be the case because we're not all there yet. So recruit diverse people. so that they can help you to bring in those diverse customers. Challenge microaggressions. Now, microaggressions is a word I'm sure you've heard a lot about in the past year, but it's those subtle things that we say to each other that are meant as compliments, but they come off as a backhanded compliment. When I was in Chicago, I just finished speaking. I went to the bar to have a glass of wine, and I ended up sitting next to a young white guy. We hit it off because I don't meet strangers. We're just laughing, talking. When he says, "You are such a credit to your race." Now, being who I am, I sat my drink down. I said, "What, white boy?" He said, "Wait, let me explain." I said, "Okay." He said, "Most Black people that I know don't work hard for what they want. They want things handed to them." So as you can imagine, this is not going well at all. But I took a moment to think. And I said, do I want to win or be right? Because if I want to be right, I get to curse this guy out, tell him off, right? I never have to see him again. But if I want to win, I'm going to explain to him why that statement was hurtful, harmful, and ignorant, right? And that's what I chose to do, because the hour that we had spent together, I didn't think this guy was inherently racist. I get that it was an insult, but I wanted to try to move the needle, and that's what I did. And he and I have remained friends for years now. I get a text a few times a year that start with "keep spreading the love." So take the time and show people grace so that we can continue to move this needle. You need to focus on inclusive marketing. Go out there. You've heard me say the word y'all a lot. It's because I have a bad habit of saying guys, which makes women feel left out. Well, I'm from Oklahoma, so I get to say y'all. Think about inclusive terms that you can use. Then, last but certainly not least, you want to question your assumptions. You want to ask yourself, could my thinking be wrong? The answer is yes. I actually met a guy that had 666 tattooed across his forehead. Now, as open as I am not down with the devil. So I'm sitting across from this guy. He keeps talking about the PTA, and I'm thinking, Parent Teacher Association, great. This guy is going to schools and scaring children, right? That day, our local newspaper had released an article about a tattoo shop that was removing gang-related or racist tattoos for free. Now I'm thinking this guy needs to be at this tattoo shop. So I go back and forth in my head as to whether or not I should tell him, because I've already put this guy in a box, right, and decided he does not read the paper or watch the news. I go back and forth and finally said, what the hell, I'm going to share with him. So I tell him about the article. He laughs at me and says, "You are the 5th person today to tell me about that article." His wife leaned in and said, "I was the first person this morning." He shared with me that 666 was not satanic, but it was a gang called the Rolling Sixes. He said, "I've hurt a lot of people. I've done a lot of bad things, and I've gone to prison. But now I've changed my life, and I live my life differently. People in gangs know what they see me living differently. They know what this means, and they come up and ask me how I changed my life." This man had led hundreds of people out of gangs. I had to ask for his forgiveness. Now, I'll be honest with you. I was thinking, well, he could put it right here on his forearm, and people would still see it. But who cares what I think? Haven't seen this dude in 4 or 5 years, and he's doing good in the world. And if his wife doesn't have a problem with it, neither should I. We have to be careful putting our judgments upon others. We have to remember, guys, that there is no them. There is only us, all of us, and we owe it to this world to leave it better than we found it. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to speak with you today. I hope that if you have liked what you've heard here, that you will go to LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Please like my pages. And one day I hope to see you again soon.